If we're gonna keep this family business alive.
I swear that name's a trap.
Kevin Beets just discovered that Tony Beets is not his real father, and now he's cutting ties for good. For years, he worked alongside Tony, believing he was next in line to inherit the family's gold mining empire. But a DNA test changed everything, revealing a shocking truth that no one was prepared for. If Tony isn't his father, then who is? And what else has been kept from him? Tune in, because the truth behind this betrayal will make the Beets family to leave the show for the rest of their lives. A family name built on a lie. For as long as anyone can remember, Kevin was the face of the next generation of Beets miners. From a young age, he worked the land, breaking rock and dredging up fortune, believing it was his birthright. He had the Beets name, the work ethic, and the know-how. People respected him because of his family ties, and he carried that weight proudly. But no one knew that deep down, something always felt just a little off. Before we dive into this, it's clear that Kevin's true origins are far more shocking than anyone ever imagined. And this revelation won't be the only thing that will leave you speechless. Family gatherings were full of odd glances and whispers behind closed doors. Older relatives dropped strange comments that never quite made sense. His siblings all shared the same sharp features and fiery attitude, but Kevin always felt like he was missing something. He ignored it for years, brushing off the doubts and convincing himself he belonged. But the cracks in the illusion were there, just waiting for the right moment to split wide open. Then came the test. A simple DNA kit, something most people do for fun or curiosity. But for Kevin, it would rewrite everything. Maybe he wanted reassurance, a final confirmation that he was exactly who he thought he was. Or maybe deep down he knew the truth was lurking in the shadows, just waiting to be revealed. Either way, when the results came in, they didn't just confirm suspicions, they demolished them. The man he thought was his father was not. The words stared back at him like a cruel joke. His whole life had been built on this name, this identity, this legacy. And now, it was nothing but a lie. The man who raised him, taught him, and molded him into the miner he had become was not his blood. Everything he thought he knew about himself had just been erased in an instant. What do you do when your entire existence has been rewritten? Kevin could have buried the truth, pretended nothing had changed, and gone on with business as usual. But that wasn't him. He couldn't unsee the truth. He couldn't fake it. And he sure as hell couldn't keep living under a name that no longer belonged to him. The hardest part was telling his family. He called a meeting with the man who raised him, Minnie, and his siblings. The tension in the room was suffocating before he even said a word. And when he finally did, silence. The unstoppable force behind the Beets family, the man known for his booming voice and iron will, sat in stunned disbelief. The weight of the truth crushed the air out of the room. No one knew what to say. No one knew how to react. Because how do you respond when your reality has just been torn apart? For years, he had been groomed to take over the family business. Knowledge, expectations, and trust had all been passed down to him. He had been put in charge of million-dollar operations, shaped into the heir that was always wanted. But now, that heir was a stranger. It wasn't just about pride. It wasn't just about business. It was about blood. And suddenly, everything felt wrong. Minnie tried to keep the family together, saying blood didn't define them, that love and memories mattered more. But the damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Kevin saw it in their eyes. Everything was different now. No matter how much they tried to pretend otherwise, the foundation had crumbled beneath them. So Kevin did what he knew he had to do. He walked away. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because he needed to find himself. The Beets name no longer belonged to him, and staying in the family business felt like wearing a suit that didn't fit. He wasn't about to keep playing a role that wasn't his anymore. He had spent his whole life being seen as an heir, the next in line, part of a golden dynasty. Now he had to figure out who he really was without that weight on his shoulders. He handed over his responsibilities to his siblings and stepped back. No more mining, no more family business, no more legacy that wasn't his to claim. He started looking into other industries, other opportunities, things that had nothing to do with gold or dredges. Because if he wasn't a Beets, then who was he? The truth is, Kevin's departure isn't just about family drama. It's a symbol of something bigger. What happens when everything you thought was yours turns out to be a lie? When the name you carried with pride suddenly means nothing? When the life you built is no longer yours to claim? Kevin Beets isn't just walking away from gold mining. He's walking away from an identity that was never his to begin with. At first, walking away felt like the right choice. But the more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the doubt creeping in. Walking away from a life built on gold. Mining wasn't just a job for him, it was in his blood. A life carved out with dirt, sweat, and sheer determination. Walking away wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. It was like leaving behind a piece of himself, a part of his identity built from years of relentless work. But sometimes, even when something is all you've ever known, you realize that staying means losing yourself. He wasn't turning his back on his family completely, but he had to put himself first for once. And whether they liked it or not, that was exactly what he was going to do. At first, the silence was deafening. No roaring engines, no clanking metal, no scent of diesel and earth mixed in the air. There were days when he second-guessed himself, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake, if he had thrown away everything for nothing. The comfort of the old life pulled at him, but something deeper inside refused to let him go back. He had to learn who he was beyond the mines, beyond the shadow of his father's name. That kind of freedom didn't come easy, but once he tasted it, there was no looking back. The old man wasn't thrilled, but even he had to admit, walking away from that life took guts. Tony had built an empire on sheer grit, and seeing his son turn away from it was a tough pill to swallow. But even Tony couldn't deny the truth. His boy wasn't cut out to be a second-hand version of himself. It wasn't about being weak. It wasn't about running away. It was about carving out a new space, where he wasn't just another cog in a machine fueled by expectations he never agreed to. Starting over wasn't smooth. There were moments of doubt, dark days where the weight of uncertainty pressed down on him. Without the safety net of the family business, he had to face the terrifying question, who was he without the mine? He explored paths he never would have considered before. Technology, conservation, industries that had nothing to do with digging gold out of the earth. Every step forward was a fight against the past, against the voice in his head telling him to just go back to what was easy. But the easy road had never been the right one, and he knew it. His siblings had no choice but to pick up the slack. They had spent years assuming they would all work side by side, carrying on the family name, growing the empire together. His exit shifted everything, forcing them to step into roles they had never expected to fill so soon. And while there was resentment, there was also understanding. They knew deep down that he had to do this, even if it made things harder for everyone else. The family bond didn't shatter, but it stretched, reshaped by the weight of his decision. Tony wasn't one to dwell on what-ifs. He had a business to run, gold to dig, and a legacy to maintain. But part of him respected his son's choice, even if he never fully said it out loud, because in a way the boy was still following in his footsteps, not in mining but in forging his own path, just like Tony had done all those years ago. It wasn't about keeping the empire intact. It was about having the guts to take risks, to bet on yourself, to refuse to be chained by the past. Tony thought he had it all figured out, but things took a sharp turn when he handed the family business over to Monica instead of his eldest son. That was a slap in the face. The one who had spent years preparing for the role suddenly found himself pushed aside like an afterthought. Walking away wasn't easy, but sitting back and watching his father pass the torch to someone else was unbearable. So he left. No grand speeches, no dramatic exits, just a quiet departure that spoke volumes. But let's be real, starting fresh in mining isn't like picking a new hobby. It's an expensive game where the stakes are sky high. You need land, equipment, and most of all, serious money. That's when the unthinkable happened. Instead of struggling alone, he turned to the one person his father could never stand, Parker Schnabel. Asking Parker Schnabel for help wasn't just about getting what he needed. It was a move that would change everything between him and his father, when family becomes the biggest rival. This was more than just a business move. It was a declaration of war. Parker, always the sharp businessman, wasn't about to miss an opportunity to stick it to his longtime rival. He sold the outcast a rock truck for a jaw-dropping $110,000. Was it overpriced? Absolutely. Did it drain his budget? Without a doubt. But it wasn't just about getting equipment. It was about making a statement. He was done living in his father's shadow. He was going to carve his own path, no matter how much it burned Tony. Tony did not take this lightly. Imagine spending years building an empire only to watch your own son run to the enemy for help. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was personal. Tony had faced tough competition before, but this was different. This was family, and it hit harder than any land dispute or gold rush rivalry ever had. Meanwhile, Monica had a mountain to climb. Running the family business wasn't just about keeping things moving. It was about proving she deserved the spot her brother was supposed to take. But nothing about this transition was smooth. The family was fractured, the crew was shaken, and Tony's fury was impossible to ignore. Cameras captured every tense exchange, every side glance, every moment of awkward silence that screamed louder than words. As for the son who walked away, his problems were just beginning. Mining isn't kind to those who take risks without backup. Sure, Parker gave him a foot in the door, but that came with its own baggage. Now the pressure was on to prove he could stand on his own, without the Beets name propping him up. Every gold haul, every setback, every decision he made was being watched. Was he a bold risk taker, or just another overconfident fool? Everyone was waiting to see if he would strike gold or crash and burn. And if all this family drama wasn't enough, the rivalry between Tony and Parker just reached a whole new level. Every ounce of gold found, every piece of equipment bought, every single move was under a microscope. Gold Rush fans couldn't get enough of the escalating tension. On one side, Tony, the hardened veteran who built his kingdom from nothing. On the other, Parker, the sharp strategist who played the game like a chess master. And right in the middle, a son with something to prove and everything to lose. Monica wasn't just dealing with a business. She was holding a crumbling family together. Her brother's departure left a gaping hole, and with Tony still seething, the pressure was unlike anything she had ever faced. Keeping the operation running was one thing, but dealing with a father who felt betrayed, that was a whole different battle. Tony tried to act like it was business as usual, but let's not pretend he wasn't feeling the loss. Losing his son wasn't just about one less worker, it was about losing a part of his own legacy. And for a man who had poured his life into his work, that was a bitter pill to swallow. Watching from the outside, it was clear he was not just fighting a business war. He was fighting to hold on to his name, his reputation, and maybe even his pride. Meanwhile, the breakaway miner was doubling down. He wasn't just mining for gold. He was mining for independence. Partnering with Parker was a risk, but it was his best shot at proving he could make it on his own. Whether it was a brilliant move or a reckless gamble, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, he wasn't afraid to take big chances. And Parker? Oh, he played his cards like a pro. Bringing Tony's son into his camp wasn't just a business win, it was a power move. This wasn't about lending a hand to a struggling miner. This was about shaking the Beets empire to its core. Parker wasn't just helping, he was making sure Tony felt every bit of this betrayal. And it was working. Back in the Beets camp, the crew had no choice but to press on. Stopping wasn't an option, not with everything on the line. Tony wasn't about to let one defection bring him down. He doubled down, pushed harder, and made it clear to everyone. His legacy wasn't going anywhere. But no matter how much he tried to keep things steady, everyone could feel it. The air was thick with tension. The cracks in the foundation were spreading. For now, the lines have been drawn. A family torn apart. A rivalry fueled by personal stakes. And a mining world waiting to see who would come out on top. But here's the real question. Can the Beets name survive this storm? Or is this the beginning of the end? Leaving his father's business was one thing, but proving he could make it on his own would be the real test. And it wouldn't be easy. A family divided by gold and pride. Kevin Beets has spent his whole life in the shadow of his father, the larger-than-life Tony Beets. From the time he could walk, Kevin was knee-deep in the world of gold mining, working under relentless rules. But things haven't exactly been smooth between him and the man who ran the operation. Over the years, their differences have turned into full-blown clashes, as he struggles to carve out his own place in an industry dominated by his father. Back in the early days of Gold Rush, he was a crucial part of the Beets crew. He knew his way around the heavy machinery, managed workers, and carried a lot of the responsibility that came with mining gold in the brutal conditions of the Yukon. He took on the tough jobs, proving that he could hold his own. But as he got older, he started to develop his own opinions about how things should be done. And that didn't sit well with the one in charge, who had no patience for anything that didn't follow his tried and true methods. The tension between them finally hit a breaking point when he made a shocking decision. He walked away from the family operation. Nobody saw it coming, least of all his father, who suddenly had to scramble to fill the gap his son left behind. His departure wasn't just a personal choice. It sent shockwaves through the entire Beets operation. Without him backing up the team, the leader of the crew had to rethink the way things ran, and it was clear that nothing would be the same. He, however, had his own plans. He wanted to prove that he could stand on his own 2 feet, away from the influence he had always been under. He put everything he had into starting his own mining venture, a bold move that was met with mixed reactions. Some people admired his drive, while others saw it as a betrayal of the family's legacy. Either way, he was determined to prove that he wasn't just living in someone else's shadow. He was a serious miner in his own right. But stepping away from that shadow came with its own set of challenges. He quickly realized that running a mining operation wasn't as simple as he thought. Equipment broke down, money ran tight, and the pressure to succeed grew heavier by the day. At one point, he had no choice but to swallow his pride and ask for help. But there were no favors to be handed out. The response was brutal. If he wanted to make it, he had to do it the hard way, just like the man before him did. That moment solidified the growing divide between them. Frustration built up. He felt like his father had the resources to help, but was choosing not to. And when he finally did get some equipment, it wasn't exactly top of the line. He voiced his anger, claiming that the old, unreliable machinery was setting him up for failure. That only fueled the debate. Was the refusal to give more help too harsh? Or was he expecting too much? Despite their constant battles, there were occasional signs of support. Whether it was out of genuine care or simply a business strategy, assistance did come when he hit rock bottom. It was a reminder that, even in the midst of their disagreements, there was still a connection between them that couldn't be completely broken. Their rocky relationship didn't just impact the two of them, it rippled through the whole Beets family. When he left, attention shifted to Monica, giving her more responsibilities within the business. Some saw it as a smart move to keep the family empire going, while others thought it was a direct response to his defiance. Either way, she was put in a leadership role, adding another layer to the Beets family drama. At its core, his struggle is about more than just gold mining. It's about proving himself. It's about stepping out from the overwhelming influence of his father and proving that he can stand on his own. But breaking away from such a dominant force isn't easy. No matter how much he tries to create his own path, the presence of the man who raised him looms over him like an unshakable force. The back and forth between them is what makes their story so compelling. They push each other, they clash, but underneath it all, there's a deep, unspoken bond. He might want his independence, but whether he likes it or not, the influence is always there. And despite the tough exterior, the one who built the Beets empire knows that he is still his son, no matter how far he strays. The question now is, where do they go from here? He has already made it clear that he wants to build something of his own, but will he ever truly break free? And the man who shaped him, for all his stubbornness, might one day have to face the reality that his son isn't just another worker, he's a competitor. The gold mining world is tough, but the toughest battles he faces might not be against nature or failing equipment. It might just be against the man who taught him everything he knows. Is Kevin Beets making the right choice by walking away? Or is there more to this DNA test than we know? Tell us what you think and remember to like and subscribe for more.